Hey everyone, and welcome to another recording of Our Human Experience, the podcast where we probe individuals to share the stories that made them who they are today.
And try to find the connection that is our human experience. And we are recording today in beautiful Babinda at the Arts Nexus podcast studio. I'm Claire Tierney.
And I'm Anna Winter.
Where can they follow us, Anna?
They can follow us on social media at Our Human Experience on Instagram and Facebook.
ourhumanexperience.com.au. We invite you
To pod binge
Our Human Experience
anytime you like.
Hey there.
Hey Claire.
How you doing?
I am fantastic.
Who have we got with us today?
We are in studio with our first in-studio guest, Kim EATON.
Kim EATON, welcome.
Hello. Hello, Claire, and hello, Anna.
We're really close, aren't we?
Yeah, we are very
table?
close,
So
but
we'll,
we are very close in life, so it's okay.
So we're going to rookie this, and
Okay.
like I said, this is our first time doing an actual live in the studio. So if you look at us sort of moving around and being a bit twitchy, it's because it's a first for us. So
And we're having a good time.
we're always having a good time because we've got Melissa looking after us in the background.
You can't see her, but she is smiling. And okay, so you start us off, Anna. What are we talking about with Kim today?
So basically, as you know, Kim and Claire, and to our listeners, this is all about our human experience. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Claire and Kim, both of you, in Cairns. And I think there are some things that resonated with me after hearing Kim's journey and the things that she has done in her life today, and they were very moving. And I was just like, your story has to be told and your human experience has to be told, because I say no more. I'm looking forward to talking about you as a child. I actually don't know much about that, and that's something that we do talk about. And then the woman you are today. So first of all, when we start these conversations, we talk about, take us to the place of Kim when you were, or Kimberly, Kim. We just had that discussion off air. Tell us a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up and what you love to do and what you're up to between sort of birth, 7, 10,
15.
Take us there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Anna. I was actually really excited to be invited to participate in this, and I don't normally talk about myself, so it's a bit of a strange thing to do. But yeah, you sent me a few challenges and set me a bit down memory lane. So I'm actually the middle of 3 girls. My sisters and I, we're only 20 months apart and 18 months apart. So there's 3 of us. So being the middle, I'm the probably the bossiest. Oh no, actually Carolyn's bossier, my older sister. But
You
no,
heard that, Carol.
Yeah, Carolyn, they're definitely the bossiest. But I'm the one who wanted to try everything first, I think. So
Right.
yeah. So my parents were very young when they had us. So mum was the eldest of 2 and dad was the eldest of 8 children. And they were 20 and 17 when they had me. And so Carolyn was born I think mum was 5 months pregnant when they got married. And so Carolyn was born when she was 16. And then I came along not that long after. And then by the time mum turned 21, she had 3 girls.
Wow.
So so that was a pretty big achievement and a big responsibility.
Absolutely.
And my parents have always been business people. They've worked for themselves and always been really hard workers. So they've sort of put that high work ethic into the 3 of us.
What did they do?
They had service stations. And so, did you
Anna's
expect
world.
that?
I didn't know that.
That's
Do
funny.
you is that from your world of upbringing as well?
See,
No.
Yeah,
Ah.
we'll talk about me another time.
Okay,
But that's my background is service stations.
Yes, well, I know how to pump petrol.
There you go.
This is why we're
Girls,
doing this.
we
hey?
can have
This
a
is like
pump off.
I'm
if
having
not-
a do-do-do-do. That sounds really weird, Claire.
It's all right.
Although I do say,
Keep
when I see
going.
new pumps, I say, that's a good-looking pump. And people go, she's strange. Sorry, we're
Yeah,
totally going
we
into
have.
fuel now.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So speaking of fuel, we had Ampol and then Golden Fleece.
Mhm.
So Golden Fleece at Petrie, and we had the mechanics, and then the petrol, obviously, and then we had the cafe. And in the cafe, my grandmothers would come, and my grandmother was a a cook, and she would make beautiful pies and caramel tarts. And we'd go every Thursday with Dad to the dairy and get the milk to make the thick shakes and milkshakes for everyone. So yeah, so that was beautiful. We always, and our after school, we were at the service station till 8, 9 o'clock at night till they finished, and then we'd all go home, or we'd stay at home and do our homework and do the jobs. And yeah, so, but we went to a private school in Brisbane called St. Margaret's, which I loved, and all girls, so my world was all girls.
Yeah.
And yeah, so when I was, and so we lived at Kalanga Petrie, and I had parents that were just, they worked really hard. School holidays, we went on YMCA camps, so we got to go on camps. Dad he loved fishing, and his family loved fishing, and so we had a boat, and so we'd go out in the boat and we'd go camping up at Fraser Island, and yeah, we had a pretty cool upbringing. Mum was very strict, she was very rigid with us, we had to make sure that we did all our jobs and, worked hard. And that was actually really good in a lot of ways, because it gave us all a really high work ethic, and we were very practical and hands-on sort of
a sense of
girls.
discipline too.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was about 11, our world changed a little bit, because my dad, they'd moved from the service station and they'd bought and built their own tyre treading factory at Petrie. And we were at my uncle's wedding, and it was actually burnt down. So I can remember the night, and one of my uncles had left the wedding and come back, and they said, "Oh, Faye and John, your premises is on fire." And so I can remember Dad driving there as fast as he could get there, and getting there, and there was fire brigades and police and everywhere, and all the things they'd worked for had gone up in flames. So, that was a big turning point for them, but their determination was to rebuild, and unfortunately they weren't insured properly. So they borrowed, they rebuilt, they paid back everyone that they owed money to for their tyres and, all the equipment, because reputation was everything.
Absolutely.
And they did that for 3 years, and we all got in and worked and that, and then they got to the point where they decided they wanted a change, and so we moved to the Gold Coast. So I was 13 when we moved to the Gold Coast.
Oh, glamour.
Mum and Dad sold it.
Yeah. Glam.
I know. First time ever I went to a state school. Boys and girls were at my school, which was very fortunate for me, because I actually laid eyes on my husband when I was at school. So yes, he was grade 11, grade 12. He was an identical twin, a football player, and just probably the cutest guy at the school.
Of course.
And I was 2 years younger, so that was beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Mum started up, I would say, the first Uber Eats. So she set up a mobile, so she was before her time. Oh, cool. So she set up a mobile lunch mobile, and then she'd go around and do that. And Dad set up a landscaping business. So yeah, and I was in end of grade 10, the last day of grade 12 for Brad, and he rang me up and asked me out on a date, and we've been together ever since. So so childhood sweethearts.
Lovely.
So that was beautiful. So but then when I was 15, my mum and dad fell apart. Their marriage broke apart, and my older sister had just completed grade 12, and she went off to the Air Force. Mm-hmm. So she joined the Air Force and did 20 years in the Air Force, which had a wonderful career. And I was at the end of grade 11, and I left home and got myself a unit. And I ended up, I'd been working at a delicatessen down on the Gold Coast from when I was 13. And the people that I was working for, they said, "Oh, Kim, you've got to go back to school." And, it just wasn't going to happen at that stage with everything going on with my family. So I said, "No, I'm just going to get a job and keep going." And I had a bit of savings because I'd been working for a while, and I was, pretty studious with all of that. And so I left school, and they said, "Why don't you try and do a pre-apprenticeship course? Because you're too good just to do nothing, just to go into, being a shop assistant." And I thought, okay. So they said, why don't you try hairdressing? So I did. I applied. There was 200 applicants. I was one of 18 that got accepted. It wasn't something that I'd thought about doing. I actually wanted to be a teacher. So university was out of the question for me then. So I did this pre-apprenticeship course and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I like looking after people. So it sort of worked. Yeah, it worked for me. And so, yeah, I actually topped the course, which was, a first for me, especially with having gone through a bit of a, trauma personally with family, going their own way.
Yeah.
And then
So it was a turning point for you. So the separation of loved ones, your heart was hurting. So I know that feeling.
Yeah.
So it was for you, it gave you direction.
It did give me direction. Purpose. Yeah, it gave me direction, gave me a purpose, definitely, because I believe everyone needs a purpose. They got to have a reason to get out of bed every day.
Totally.
And I certainly had one because I had to survive and I had to prove that I could do it, and at 16, being able to do that was, that was huge. And so I actually ended up doing the pre-apprenticeship course. I volunteered every Saturday at Stefan's and got to know them girls there. And I went up for the interview and I got a position, an apprenticeship with Stefan's. So I was really fortunate with that. And he was just brilliant to work for. I worked at his Pacific Fair salon and there was 18 of us there. The salon just had such a magic buzz. And we learnt so much in relation to client service, professionalism. I can still remember my manager, we were really flat out and I was sort of about 6-7 months in and she's got me outside with a whiteboard teaching me how to do a haircut and then sending me out to do a haircut. It was also at the time when we had all the blackouts in Queensland. So we were actually cutting hair out in the the walkway from the salon.
Okay. Really?
Yeah. But yeah, I made sure I was the one who everyone asked to shampoo their hair. I was did the best head massage. I
was going to say,
I loved it.
Was that based on your skill or your gregariousness? Do you feel like both?
Both.
Yeah, both of them came
into play. But I have got very strong hands.
Yeah,
so.
Good girl. All right.
I'm really just like, it's the best bit about it. You can go back to a hairdresser. Absolutely for that sensation.
Yeah.
Because, it's, and that must be, people in, beauty and hair salons, it's a really special job because you're touching people and it's a trust thing too. It's very personal. Yeah. So tell,
I agree with that. And like when people come to me, and especially as I got further down in my apprenticeship, you'd build up a really good rapport with your regular clients and you became friends and, you actually, you would do anything to help them. And, when women aren't feeling good, we generally go to the hairdresser for a haircut or a change.
Absolutely. I tend to pull out a bottle of dye myself. But absolutely.
Yeah. We need that bit of touch and that bit of loving and, and that confidentiality and someone who cared. So that was me, and I actually did hairdressing for 14 years. So
can I ask, Stefan's was pretty prestigious salon to get accepted into, yeah? So were your clients prestigious or was it just anybody came that way? Like, did you come across anyone famous at that age that you were,
Stefan liked having famous people in his salon, especially on
Instagram too.
Yes.
This is
way before Instagram.
So we did all the who's who on the Gold Coast came in. So it was wonderful. Yeah. So you got to know all of those people. Yeah. And actually one of the girls that I worked with, she actually played hockey for Australia. So she would run to work in the morning and she was so fit and had the best legs. She was just so strong. This Debbie Bowman was her name. Yeah. But she was a great hairdresser as well, but she was just so dedicated. And so here I was working with a Australian Olympian
athlete.
Which was just wonderful. Because, and you don't realise.
People can do amazing things, and especially a lot of athletes too. Now there's so much money in sport, but a few years ago, and really not that long ago, athletes had to work a job as well as represent the country or play the footballers. They were brickies, labourers, and all sorts of things. I mean, that's how they, they were training through the day as well. But it's changed a lot these days. Yeah,
100%. She would run 25 Ks before she'd do a day of hairdressing. Wow. And then run home in the afternoon, and I'd be like, "Oh, you're amazing."
Dedication.
Yeah. So where did this hairdressing? where did that then take you? So take us back to sort of, I'm thinking Brad might have come into the equation. There's a man, and
yeah.
How did that date go?
Yeah, that date went very well. We sat outside on a fence and we just talked all night, and it was just beautiful. But yeah, we just connected, and yeah, we just knew, and yeah, he was just such a beautiful guy. Now, when Brad left school, he did a couple of years of making pie and furniture, and he wanted to be a policeman. Mm-hmm. So he was 6'4", big, strong guy. Nice. He got turned down the first time he applied because he was too skinny. So yeah, I know.
How old was he at that age?
Just under 19. So he got in. He got in when he was 19. Okay. But yeah, he put 20 kilos on while he was at the academy.
Right.
So yeah,
really,
yeah,
lean muscle mass. I'm thinking.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Well, the kind of years of 16 or 14, 13, 14, 15. They are very lean years. I have a 16-year-old boy, and they are very lean years, and they want to fill out as well. So that pride that he would have got by being accepted as well could have created that wonderful moment where he went into manhood.
Yes, I actually believe that. I think Brad went from a boy to a man while he was at the academy. Yeah. He'd wanted to be a policeman from when he was 4, so that was huge.
Okay. Yeah. So whereabouts is the academy?
In Brisbane. Mm-hmm. So at Oxley in Brisbane, but now there is 2 academies in Queensland. So I went through. So I eventually became a police officer, and I went through the Townsville Academy. But back then, Brad did 6 months in Brisbane while I was on the Gold Coast, and then Brad came back to the Gold Coast, and that was his first posting at Raw Beach. So
I wonder why.
Nice place.
Yeah,
he was there.
Yeah, and family, and it was good. It worked. Yeah, so then Brad came back to the Gold Coast, and then 18 months later, he got posted to Mount Isa. So,
whoa,
yeah,
I love Mount Isa.
Oh, so did I.
So you went to Mount Isa?
Yeah, I went to Mount Isa.
For how long?
Did you do hair in Mount Isa?
I certainly did.
So you went from Stefan's on the Goldie to Mount Isa. And what was the salon called in the Isa?
Oh, my goodness. I actually got there, and I had the job before I got there, and I walked past that salon for a week before I was brave enough to walk in and say I'm here. They were so trendy. I was a Stefan girl.
From the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
They would have been flocking in to see you.
I know.
The girls. So tell us a little bit about going outback, because I'm a bit of an outback girl, and those women would have been just so lucky to have you.
Well, I was 18 and a half. And, yeah, Brad said, I've been transferred to Mount Isa. Do you want to come? And I went, okay. So it was a Saturday afternoon, and we'd been paying off a friendship ring, and Brad was very excited. He'd paid it off, and he came to the front of the salon, and he goes, Kim, let's get married. And he gave me, so in the middle of me doing a haircut, my husband proposed to me.
At Stefan's on the Gold Coast.
Yes, at Sundale, which is no longer there. I put my ring on, went back and showed my client, I'm engaged now. We got married. Brad actually went to Mount Isa for 3 months, then came back. We got married, and then we drove out to Mount Isa. So,
a romantic story.
I know.
That is so romantic.
So sweet.
Oh, so we got to Mount Isa, and oh my goodness, it was an eye-opener for me. I was a Gold Coast girl.
It would have been.
Yeah, but it was good. So the salon was beautiful. There was 9 staff. Mount Isa people, they had a lot of money. They had an expendable, and people wanted to look good.
Nowhere to spend it.
No, so they changed their hair colours, and like we did lots of colour work and lots of cuts, and yeah, it was great.
So did you fine tune your art in Mount Isa? Like, did you get to experiment like you couldn't have probably potentially on the Goldie? Like, did you have women go, I've been stuck on 25,000 acres and it's been 45 degrees for 2 months. I want new hair.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'd be thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly did. I learnt flat tops and foxtails and mullets and and all that. And we actually got to know lots of the landowners, and they'd fly in by helicopter and come in and have their hair done. And then they invited us out to the property. So we'd go out and we'd go mustering with them for the day. And then at night we'd have a big get together, and I'd do everyone's hair. So I'd give all the cowboys all these wedges,
glass of
and all
wine
these
in one
trendy.
hand.
So before your time, like your mum with Uber Eats, like you're doing.
I was the mobile
hairdresser. You were doing the hairdresser before there was such a thing.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. It was great. Yeah, so we did 2.5 years there, and then Brad got posted from Mount Isa to North Stradbroke Island. So from Mount Isa, I worked in a salon called Island Styles. Yes, so we went back to the bleaching and the blonde looks and the sun-dried hairs. Yeah, so that was gorgeous. And we were only there for a year because Brad, by that stage, had wanted to go into become a detective. So we left Stradbroke Island and moved to Innisfail.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Innisfail we did nearly 5 years. We did in Innisfail, and I love Innisfail.
Yeah,
it's beautiful, green, rolling hills. It was just magic time.
It's a beautiful area.
So you went from hairdressing to being a policewoman.
Yes,
and often we talk about what were the experiences that took you to that career, or who were the mentors. Would I be right in thinking that Brad was actually a mentor for that?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. Like when we moved to Mount Isa, not so much on the Gold Coast, but Mount Isa, you were in a small town and you got to know all the police and all the police wives and the families, and you actually became part of the Queensland Police as a wife. You know, and Brad had come home and you got the phone calls and, you know, the guys going in the middle of the night, and, you know, Brad was away relieving in Dejara and Julia Creek and Normanton and all these places. And so I'd go and have, you know, the weekends with him, and so I'd be the policeman's wife coming down, and I'd work behind the bar in the local hotel in Dejara, and and so I thought I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't.
Can I just pick up on something that you're saying there? And I'm getting a sense of, and even I have had the privilege of knowing you before or speaking to you today, but community to you and helping people is a big part of what resonates deeply within you. So was that something that you saw going into these Indigenous communities and going out west where, you know, there are social issues, and did this give you a sense of purpose where you thought, I can really make a difference, and together with my husband we could be a couple that could, you know, why else are we on the planet? Was that something that you guys discussed as a couple, or to help other people and help community?
Yeah, that's probably the ethos of Brad and I. We do love people and we do love helping, and, you know, it is such a proud feeling to be able to walk in and help people in situations when their lives are falling apart, to be able to be the person to come in and try and pick it all up and help guide them through that initial emergency, and then obviously down the track.
Is that a sense of being protective to protect someone, because the law is protection, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we have laws in place for certain reasons, and is that a sense that you wanted to protect vulnerable children or vulnerable people that you could see?
Yeah, I think for me that emerged. So when we got to Innisfail, I ended up buying a hairdressing salon there. And I had 9 staff work for me, and I bought it with another lady. And we had a lot of people come in that had been involved in domestic violence, and we had, you know, lots of people that had been involved in, you know, there was quite a lot of drugs around at the time and that, and I saw the effects of that on people. And so that was you know, underlying in my mind, and something that I'd always thought I'd like to do. But at that stage, we actually started to have the boys. So I had Angus, our first son, in Innisfail, and then we had Fraser. When Angus was 1 year old, we sold the salon and we moved to, Brad was transferred to the drug squad in Brisbane, and there he ran undercover drug jobs. So I was sort of like secondary to Brad, like career-wise, policing-wise, but because I hadn't started at that stage, but I was always sort of admired what he did. Then I had Fraser, and then I had Mackenzie, and then I tossed up joining the police when Mackenzie, so my third one, so I had 3 in 3 years, 3 boys, and I tossed up joining the police then because we lived not far from the Queensland Police Academy. So I thought this could work, but Brad wanted to go out west again into a small police station because, yes, he found it rewarding and being the detective there and being able to do things. So, and I said, well, I think I might have a go for this 4th child and maybe a girl after having, you know. Yeah. But anyway, we had Campbell.
So,
yes, we arrived in Moranbah. I'd found out the week before I was
Where's
having.
Moranbah?
Moranbah is southwest, 2 hours southwest of Mackay, and
inland.
Yeah, inland. And Brad he covered about 6 small stations. So it's a mining area. So a lot of issues there, a lot of social issues, but also issues with the mines as well for him as the local detective. We were there a year, and yeah, it just wasn't working for me. Yeah. And Campbell was a reflux baby, and And our deal was, we went into a police house, and so financially I knew I had to go back to work. I didn't want to go back to hairdressing because I knew how much effort I would put into that. I wanted to do uni, but I just thought, no, I can't do 3 years. So my quickest way of getting a good income, doing something that I thought I would love, was joining the police.
Yeah.
So yeah,
With
so we
4
moved.
boys.
Yeah, Campbell was 1 when I started at the police academy. I was 31, and I would drive every Sunday night. I'd leave Cairns and I'd drive 4 hours with other recruits down to Townsville, and I did that for 6 months, and then we'd come back every Friday night.
Wow.
But my younger sister Deborah, had just moved on from the Air Force. So she did 10 years in the Air Force, and she'd just had her first baby. So she came to live with us. So her and her husband and Brad managed the boys. So we had 5 little boys under 5.
And 2 house husbands.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
that's before your time too.
And Deborah worked at night.
Really?
So the boys looked after the 4 little boys at night. And then I'd come home on the weekends. So
he supported you for you to do what you needed to do.
Yeah. And it was really good timing because Brad had just been promoted to senior sergeant. So this was the first time he'd worked 8 to 4 Monday to Friday. So
wow, massive change.
Yeah.
So tell us, you obviously graduated, and as a couple and as a family unit, what direction did you go in then after you graduated?
Yeah. So when I graduated, the first year is the first year constable program. So doing a lot of shift work. I had 2. The boys were Angus and Fraser were grade 2, grade 1. Mackenzie was kindy, and Campbell was, toddler. So I had them in daycare, and I would, the days that I wasn't working, I'd keep them at home, whether I was needing to sleep or not, because, guilty mother being at work. So, yeah. But I did the first year constable program, and I just loved it right from day one. So for the first month, I was with my field training officer, and we were in plainclothes, and we were walking the Esplanade, and we were just coming across offences and locking people up for that. So it was just amazing. But I learned early it's all about how you talk to people, and how you communicate is with policing is just huge.
Which I would say is a skill, not a given, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you would have seen over the years that some people don't develop that skill, but it's how beneficial it is to appreciate that or achieve that level of understanding.
Well, you're looking after
listening.
Community.
Yeah,
you're looking after community, and I mean, that's the thing. Growing up, it's people's perception of the law. So growing up for me, I always knew that was, if I was ever in trouble, I would go and get help from the police. The police were there to help me, and they were there to support me. So for me, when I hear your story, I know that it took you in many directions as a family. So elaborate a little bit. So when you first started in Cairns, and then where did it take you from there?
Yeah, so with my role, I was actually flabbergasted, because I probably grew up the same as you, Anna, thinking that, if you needed help, you call the police. And I was flabbergasted. Probably for the first 6 months, every house I went into didn't have a bed. There was mattresses on the floor. The conditions some of these kids and families were living in were appalling, because policing, responding, especially general duties, you're responding to the 10% of the community that really generally really need a big hand, a big helping hand. And these kids were told, don't go near the bully man, they're coming to take you away. Yeah. And, working in Indigenous communities, that was gold for me. I just got to see and understand and learn so much, So yeah, I loved doing that. And early on in my career, I was involved in 2 rapes where, one, I was there with the scenes of crime. So I was doing a rotation through that section, and the lady had been raped on the way home from an event, and she was raped by a friend, and she was thrown onto a wood heap, and it sort of came out of the blue, and she was in shock, and she called the police the next day, didn't know whether to report or not. Anyway, we went around to get evidence, and my partner had gone to take photos, and I stayed with the lady, and she talked to me, and she showed me her bruises and what had happened, and it all sort of corroborated with the story. But I wasn't the arresting officer or the interviewing officer, but I just took notes. And anyway, in that story, she ended up not pressing charges, but then she fell pregnant to that rape and she aborted the baby and they did the DNA and, got the evidence against him. And, and so there was that rape that occurred. And so he was eventually charged. And then there was another one when I worked in the inquiry section. So the inquiry section with the police, that does all the domestic violence and all the coroner's reports. So I did a couple of years in that section, predominantly because it was around, your latest shift was 10 o'clock at night. So it worked for me with the boys trying to juggle it. And the police were very good and understanding, with that. But I never asked for any favours. So, but I was, it sounds awful, but I was actually really good at with dead bodies and deaths and helping families through that period, because it's awful delivering a death message.
Oh, and
would be the worst part of the job.
And that's the thing, like, every job has, so much depth to it, no matter what you do, whether it be working in a service station, cutting someone's hair, there's always a personal element to it because it all involves human beings. Yeah. And it's just that part of your life that, tell me a little bit more. Sorry, it's just you're so interesting. I have so many questions. So to have that responsibility socially, it's a big deal.
So can I just finish that second rape? So I had this lady come into the inquiry section, and because we did all the domestic violence matters, and she had been in an incident the week earlier, and in that week, because police are mandated that they must take out a domestic violence application if they're deemed to be domestic violence has occurred. So, and the likelihood that it is going to be reoccur. So she was in, and I was helping her with this next stage. But she started speaking to me, and she said, "Kim, more happened that night, and I never told the police." And so she didn't tell them that she'd been raped by her ex-partner. She just told him that he'd been assaulted and tried to, he'd broken into her home. So I took a statement from her and I went upstairs to the detectives, because the detectives normally do that. And they said, "Kim, do you want to run with it?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So I got all the evidence, and he had contacted her ex-partner and trying to defame her. And she was an Asian lady. And, her story just added up, and the evidence all supported what she was saying. And anyway, I invited him to come into the station for an interview, and he came, and then he refused to partake. So then I arrested him. And so it was a big thing for a second-year constable to do a rape charge, but obviously I was being mentored by, the detectives. Now, I ended up losing that, which broke my heart. And there was a few reasons, but at the end of the day, the day that they found him not guilty, because it went to trial, I said to her, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Because I actually had my heart and soul into the law, thinking that we'd done everything right, and it was her word against him, unfortunately, and they believed him. And the jury believed him. And you know what she said to me? And it's always stayed with me. I've got shivers now when I think about it. She said, "Kim, you believed me. You believed me." And that's what matters, and that actually gave me a bit of strength, because of what and that story actually started me down the track of doing family violence and domestic violence.
I was just about to say, is that what led you to the family violence unit? Wow, okay.
Now that woman, that offender, 5 months later, he broke the arm of a Papua New Guinean lady that he'd started seeing. So he was picking on these minority group women, and he was doing awful things to them. And it was one of the girls that I'd gone through the academy with. She'd gone to that scene, and I said, "Don't let him get away with this one," So and he was a well-to-do guy in Cairns, but you just never know, hey.
You don't. No, you really don't.
So that drove you into the next part of your life.
Yeah. So at that point, I'd done a couple of years policing, and Brad had applied for and got a job up in Papua New Guinea. Now, Brad had grown up in PNG till he was 6 when he was young. So he'd gone up there with the on the police program as an advisor to the Southern Province, so the old Papua. And so that was a pretty prestigious job for Brad. and a great opportunity. But that left me at home with the 4 boys.
So you didn't go?
No, because I'd just joined the police. So
okay, of course, yeah.
So I had to juggle the boys and working full time, and Brad away, and he would come home, once every couple of months for a weekend or for a week, and then go again. So that was a pretty tough 2 years with him away. And then he came home for a year, and he ran the because he used to be in charge of the drug squad in Cairns. So, he's got a lot of experience in there, and he is a beautiful manager and a beautiful leader of his team. And so that was really interesting for me to be at the police at the bottom level, and then Brad to be at senior level. But it actually gave me a lot of opportunities because people trusted me. Mm-hmm. They knew me before. I was a mature, so I got to do dignitary protection and looking after.
Who did you protect?
Well, I actually looked after John Howard because we're in Babinda.
Okay.
And I can remember walking down the streets down here with John Howard after a cyclone, unfortunately. But so I got to protect him. Lots of international dignitaries that would come to North Queensland. So that was pretty cool.
They would have been safe in your care, I'm sure.
And John Howard, he liked to sit in the front seat, and he would sit beside me. And I'd driven him around. I think I drove him around about 7 times in my
laps of Babinda.
No, as in 7 different occasions that he'd come. No, not laps of Babinda. Well,
it was really quick.
No, we probably need. And he was great because you'd be driving him, and then he'd see a group of school kids, and he'd go, "Pull over here," and it wasn't part of the program, but he's the Prime Minister.
Fabulous to see that side of somebody, because no matter what, the leader of a country is going to have all sorts of opinions, and it's great from your point of view to have that experience where you go, okay, he might be that type of person, but when he was with me, I saw what you saw, which is just a great experience. Yeah.
Well, my parents loved him being, business people and Liberal voters, and he was a very intelligent man, and he really cared, and and that shone through. And I remember picking him up one day at the airport, and he'd been in Townsville and he'd done an interview, and he goes, and he remembered my name. I don't know if he looked at my name badge.
That's a skill. But even so, it's still a skill to think about that and use it, and it's very personal.
Yeah. So, and he said, Kim, would you mind putting the radio on the ABC? Because I've just done an interview. So I'm driving along and I'm hearing John Howard talk on the radio, and he's sitting in the car beside me. And
Surreal.
I'm like, is this really happening? So so I loved that side of it. And that was just sort of like a little side gig that I'd do. And then after the inquiries and I did a couple of years there, and I used to do all the postmortems, a lot of the postmortems in Cairns. So, which is a big thing, I know.
That's an interesting thing to be drawn to.
I know. It wasn't that I was drawn to it; it was part of the role.
Okay.
I don't think I would have put my hand up to do that. But in saying that, I did it with so much respect for that person, and I tried to be able to mentally cope. I had to look at the scientific side of why we were doing what we were doing, and talking to the, to get the evidence and to, the determination of what happened. But that was hard, and I got to the point, I think, after seeing a little boy who'd been hit by a bus, and and he was the same age as my kids, and just I got to the point where I knew I needed to move out of there.
Out of that.
So I went to Cairns Central. And started being the police officer at Cairns Central.
Walking through Cairns, been doing the beat at Cairns Central.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started doing that, and my first few shifts I wore a skirt. And then I had to give chase to this guy and tackle him to the ground, and he'd stolen a car, and my skirt ended up, you can imagine.
Costume change.
Yeah, I wore clots all on pants after that day. Save the skirts for court.
What we learn.
Yeah. But I actually really enjoyed Cairns Central. I felt like, that show, Are You Being Served? Morning, I'd say to everyone, all the shop owners, and I got to know them, and then all the security. But we'd work together, and, we had a group of itinerant people that would come, and they'd hide all their flagons and their goons in the goon bags in the meter boxes. So I'd go out and have a chat to them in the morning, and and say, guys, you can't be drinking here, and I'd have to tip out all their wine, which they didn't like. But I'd say, you're welcome to stay here, but please don't, get drunk and cause any dramas. So so I'd always do it respectfully.
It's finding the peace, isn't it?
I know.
It's finding that. It's just it's a fine line, isn't it? You know, because there's reasons and there's, and that's where, you know, like you said before, like all the other life experiences of, you know, cutting hair and being a mum and being out at Mount Isa and all walks of life, you know, because everyone is uniquely different, aren't they?
Yeah. Do you feel, Kim, because you had that small town experience and the Indigenous communities experience, that respect that you could give somebody who was hanging out at a public place, that some people could feel that they wanted to just move someone along or whatever, but to respect that this was a choice they'd made to be there. It might not have been the best choice, but you were there to help rather than
100%,
make it worse.
100%. That was our job. And like even when I was working the beat, as in driving the van around the city beat, one of my first jobs in the late afternoon would be to go and pick up everyone and take them down to the shelter so that they had somewhere safe to stay for the night. They'd be fed, they'd have clothes. You know, I cared about them, and you'd get to know them by name.
I'm sure they all knew you by first name.
They'd get to know you, but it also stopped all the problems.
Sure.
You know, it worked both ways. You weren't having the tourists being hassled, and these guys were safe and had somewhere to stay, you know. So it worked both ways, and I just thought the community side of the policing was, it was good. You had other officers that we're not taxi drivers. We're not.
That's what I was sort of referring to. I was thinking that there would be that attitude. My grandfather was a police officer down in Melbourne, and back when there were no guns and you walked the beat, so Cairns Central would have had that feel that they had back in the day, walking the beat and getting to know everybody and knowing the community and knowing who the people were that needed help.
It's a whole trust piece, isn't it? Because when you get to know someone, people begin to trust you. They'll probably be more inclined to come to you when they need help.
And I did a lot of work. I did a lot of fraud investigations there where people would steal, you know, and like I had one lady one day, and she obviously had some mental health, and we had a lot of people with mental health issues because Cairns Central is the end of the train line, and North Queensland, Cairns is the end of the train line. So they'd get off the train,
of course,
and they'd walk across to the shopping centre, and so then I'd be alerted fairly quickly that something wasn't quite right with someone. So, you know, and then we needed to get them help and make them safe, you know.
Well, Cairns is a big country town, isn't it?
It is.
You know, like it's not like we're in a city. I've never had that feel. Like it's just we're very lucky here. And I suppose within saying that means people become more familiar. You're not just another face like in a big city. Like we may be classified as a city, but we're actually, I feel it's a feeling of a country town, and there's familiarity with people, and so like you said, you would have got to know everyone,
and that was my job. It was my job to know who was who and what they were doing and what made them tick, and so
are you still in the police force?
No.
What happened?
No. So after Cairns Central, I went into the training area where I looked after and provided training to all our first year constables. And I also went into the use of force and firearms and became a use of force and firearms instructor. So I did that for a few years. And Brad had come back from PNG. He was in Cairns for a year, and then he went to the Solomons for 2 years, just under 2 years. And so he went over there with the Australian Federal Police on a secondment. And he'd come home, and we were sitting on our deck at home reading the newspaper, and he goes, Kim, Customs, they're arming part of their workforce, and they're looking for use of force firearms instructors. This is what you do, why don't you put in for a position? I said, oh no, I'm not interested, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. He goes, no, go on, do it, just see how your resume goes and give it a run. So I need to keep my husband happy. Things I do. I put in for a position. So anyway, I went through the whole process, and the only reason I went for the interview was it was in Brisbane and it was my sister's birthday. So I thought, great, I'm getting a free flight to Brisbane. And that's why I went, because I thought I could have the day with Carolyn and just quickly do this interview, and then
you got the job.
I got the job.
Did you have a good time with your sister?
I did. I did. And she showed me where Customs House was and all of that. So I sort of surprised everyone, including myself, and resigned and took the position. But I actually didn't take it straight away. I said thank you, but no thank you. And I kept working with the police for a year. And then Brad came back from the Solomon Islands. They knew he was coming back. And so they came back and said, we've moved a position to Cairns. We want you to come across, because they needed a female instructor. And that's what I said. You want a female, don't you? And he said, no, we want you. But the fact that you're a female is a bonus, because it was all male.
That's lovely.
Yeah, he answered
nice.
it right.
Yeah, nice.
So there was all male
Diplomat.
instructors. Yeah. So I went across, and oh my goodness, my first 3 weeks I was in Darwin, and I had to pass and do the course. So the firearms program that they did was the same as Queensland Police, so that was great. So I was helping the students as well as being on the range shooting myself. The defensive tactics was all based around completely different to Queensland Police. It was Krav Maga, which was customs defensive tactics was more about officers being able to perform self-defense and get away from the scene, because they have some arrest powers, but not a big range. So it was more about self-defense.
Can you explain that type of self-defense?
Yeah.
Krav Maga.
Krav Maga. Yeah. So Israeli defensive tactics. Yeah. It's brilliant stuff. Like they teach the Israelis army in 20 hours. They can teach them. And it's basically defending yourself by counterattacking. So yeah, but it was just completely different for me from the police, because I'd done a lot of training in use of force in relation to crowd control, in relation to dignitary protection. I'd done a lot of high-speed driving, with all of that training. It was a 6-week course doing all of that. Plus, so it was, completely, it wasn't control and contain someone and like we were doing with the police. It was just, it was completely different. So that sort of blew my mind a bit. And it was the same week that I'd turned 40. So, Anyway.
Last week.
No, thank you, Claire. Yeah. So
Where did that take you? Because I know that I've had conversations with you before, Kim, about you teaching self-defense to women, and for me that resonated. And I think that
that's a brilliant skill.
Yeah, and just being you've been able to share these skills with women in very vulnerable situations. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I did 2 years with customs, and then I took leave without pay to go and work in PNG. And that's where I taught a lot of the women up there and officers how to defend themselves. And we set up in Papua New Guinea. I worked
in
Port Moresby.
In Port Moresby.
Yeah. And so I worked as the Family, Women and Children's Rights Advisor to the Law and Justice sector through the Papua New Guinea Australia Law and Justice Partnership. So it's a big.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah,
but yeah.
So
very important.
Yeah, it was a cool job. Yeah, it was. It was actually, I believe, everything I'd done in my life leading up to that point had led me to that job. Yeah, and I think out of everything I've done in my life, that few years that I did in PNG, I think that's some of my proudest work.
Tell us more about that.
So and it was actually beautiful, because one of the guys that Brad had gone through the academy with, he was up there working, and my program that I was there to help implement connected very closely to his, and he'd been there for quite a while. So he was setting up the family sexual violence unit within the police, because at that stage there was no domestic violence legislation. Police thought it was a family matter, and for go away, it's a family matter, we're not going to respond even though you've had your hand cut off, your ears cut off, you've been murdered or whatever. It was just terrible, the response. So we set up a family sexual violence unit within the police, and I got there the week before we set the training up. And so I was there and stayed with all the staff that we trained. So we trained 20 officers initially, and I managed all of that. And when a guest speaker wouldn't show up, then I'd jump in and run that session. And, that was brilliant, because I'd just come from training all the first year constables, training everyone, so I could. So we set up 2 bus seats outside this office, and the women started coming. What's that saying?
So amazing
if you put it there and they will come.
Helping people.
Yeah. So the word of mouth got around, and we had this lady come this day, and she'd had her hands cut off because it's not uncommon for a man up there to carry a machete, and they walk with the machetes behind their backs, and then when something goes down, they attack. So I taught all the women how to block. And if you need to block to prevent your hand being cut off, you block your wrists on wrists. You don't block here.
Is that because of the bone?
Yeah, you block bone on bone, like
to prevent the hand.
Yeah. Okay. So if he's coming at you with a knife, you're going to be blocking with that part of your wrist, not higher up so that he can cut your hand off, because they're doing it with power. And as you're blocking, then you sort of, but it's, so I would teach some of the girls these skills, but just amazing. But what the women went through, and for the police, it was just huge. Huge what
absolutely.
goes on.
I mean,
still goes on.
Absolutely, to have countries unite in that way to ultimately help people's safety, and just, we don't know how lucky we are. We do know how lucky we are in this country, but when you tell this story, I feel very proud to be born here on this, the ground that we walk on in our country, and for you to be able to go and help other women in those really traumatic circumstances to change the way of thinking for the better. And I'm sure that those people that you helped would say that, because all cultures have different things that go wrong, if you'd like to call it, or culturally maybe not right, or and then over time we all recognize, well, really that's not a healthy, sane practice, and it's just like to go into be actually changing laws within a country. That's groundbreaking.
And it's sort of like that behavior is sort of a bit of an accepted behavior. And
did the community, did they all get behind you and support you?
Oh, it's very political.
That's a whole nother interview, Anna. Honestly, it's very.
I'm saying very that naively, Anna. I'm always thinking that.
But what is, to tap on what you were saying, what is really powerful and where you can feel proud when you do live in a country that has financial and capacity to deploy special units, and even if they don't change the mindset of the community, it helps the vulnerable that are there. So even if one woman manages to not lose her hands by learning that, you've done a great job, and you would feel so proud of what you've done.
Papua New Guineans like to see things literally, and I used to tell them this story. I'd put a photo up when I'd train the police, and I'd put a photo up of a little boy on the beach picking up starfish, and like the beach would be covered in starfish, and I said, this man came along this day and he watched this little boy and he kept picking up the starfish and putting them one by one into the ocean. And the man said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm just putting them back into the water where they come from. I'm helping them. He goes, but there's so many to help. And the little boy goes, as he puts one down, but I just helped to that one. I just made a difference to that one.
Nice.
And that story resonated with the Papua New Guineans,
because it was,
they could understand it
and see it.
Yeah. But, in Australia, we've got, we haven't got it right in Australia. And when I was policing here, I was lucky enough, I was part of the Cairns Regional DV Service. So that was the NGO side of the response for Cairns. And at that time, we'd sent up the facts back, as in when I say we, Queensland Police and the NGO. And it was a piece of paper where police would go to a domestic violence, and it was a voluntary thing. Would you like a counsellor to support you and call you, and you'd work out a safety regime when they could call and that, and so to get some help and to get those services working together, which is that's gold. If you can get services working together, that's just wonderful. And so I was lucky enough to learn a lot of good techniques and good practices here in Australia that we could take up there, but you have to nuance it to the environment. Like, there was no legislation, so the police weren't mandated to do it. There was no petrol money. Half the time they didn't have a car. There was no interim protection orders or protection orders. So at the time, we'd just found a loophole in the District Courts Act in PNG, and so we trained all the magistrates in relation to to interim protection orders, and we started collecting data and stats. And so initially, back then, we had 13 female magistrates and I think 100 male. And the women were on side because they got it. And some of the men were, and including at that time the chief magistrate. So with that high level support, we got out and we rolled it around the country and we kept the stats. And then the magistrates started to go, hang on, we've got a problem here, you know. And then it got to the point, well, this isn't strong enough. We need to be able to send them to jail longer than 6 months. And we, you know, and a lot of the people we were dealing with, they couldn't read or write. They were illiterate, but they knew the court stamp on the piece of paper. You know, one other thing that we did, the hospitals would charge 50 kina for all these women to get a medical statement or, you know, to get a medical certificate to say that they'd had injuries, and then they, you know, could do something in relation to a charge with assault or that.
Really?
Now, most of these women didn't have 50
kina, no.
So we actually got everybody involved, and you know, we advocated for that to be removed, and we got it removed.
And that's a change of policy and a change of affecting culture in a sense.
Yeah, it was huge just having that removed. You know, like that was wonderful. So and just we worked in HIV, family violence, and gender. So I was part of the cross-cutting issues team up there. And there was 6 of us, and we supported everybody, and we had 8 agencies that we would work with. But predominantly I worked mainly with the police, the prosecutions and the courts. So we got those interim protection orders in. We got the appetite for domestic violence. And so then we looked, you know, we worked with another NGO who then worked, you know, we connected sections. I'm very good at networking. Connecting.
Yeah. Networking in a different way to the way that word is thrown around a lot these days. It might be very social here with networking small departments to make a bigger difference.
Yes. Networking with meaning and purpose, and also having secondary and third level networks. So knowing who can go to or who knows someone that you can go to, because all that work is very political.
Absolutely.
So but beautiful and empowering, and you know, you connect the people and make them understand each other's jobs. So they hold each other accountable too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to bring us back to as a couple, and where life took you after PNG, because 4 boys. Now these boys are getting on.
Yeah.
How old are the boys now?
Did the boys go to PNG? Were they?
Yeah. So we took Campbell. He was in grade 5, so the youngest. So he did 3 years of schooling up there. Mackenzie came up and he did 1 semester, but the other boys went to St. Augustine's and boarded. So 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 that was good. But every holidays they were up with us, and if they weren't, my dad would come and have the boys, or I'd come down. You know, between us we would juggle it. And you know, they got to experience lots of things being in PNG, living in a compound and that. I remember picking up my dad one day, and Campbell and I had gone to pick him up because he was coming to have 2 weeks with us, his first trip up, and then he was taking Campbell home with him. And Campbell goes, "Granddad, we wave and smile at everyone because if we don't, they'll kill us." And I'm like, "Oh, how did you get that?" Because we're living in a compound. I know. And then I'm thinking, "Oh, I've traumatized this poor kid." But you know, Campbell actually, he witnessed the police shoot a guy's leg off, and it was outside his school, and he was at swimming training, and all of a sudden, the police chased these offenders. There was 5 of them. It's just crazy, the response, you know, like we don't do any of those pursuits in you know, Australia, and there's a reason why, you know, because innocent bystanders get very
injured.
Yeah.
And so it's very different there.
Yeah.
Wild West.
Very.
Reputation of PNG.
It's amazing. I was coming back one day from doing station inspections with one of the chief inspectors, Delilah Sendeka, and all of a sudden everyone in front of me, because you drive with your car doors locked, windows up, you get in and out of your car and you go, you know, like there's certain security protocols, and if someone tried to stop you, on the road, you know, the DFAT AusAid protocol, UN protocol, is to run them over, you know, that's just not something that sits with you as a person.
I've heard very similar things from many years ago when people I knew well were positioned in Samoa.
Yeah.
And a very similar thing, you know, they had that lifestyle aspect, and friends of mine who lived in the rougher times in South Africa, and where that thing of self-protecting, lock your doors. If you hit somebody, drive on, don't stop, because you could be in real danger. So you kind of know that when you go. But was it more overwhelming than you imagined? Like, you went in not knowing much about.
Yeah, I'm really glad I went in with the training that I had.
Yep.
You know, Queensland Police had prepared me well.
Yep.
And then the extra work that I'd done with, you know, customs and, you know, Australian Border Protection, Border Force, with Krav Maga and that was just brilliant. Not that I ever had to use it. I was only attacked once with a guy with a bush knife, but in his defense, he was obviously had mental health issues, and he spotted me, and I was stuck in traffic, and he spotted me in my car, and he just ran at me. I was a white Mary on her own in a vehicle, and he ran at me, and I just saw him coming, and I just hit, and I was sort of stuck behind, but I pushed my way through. But he got to me, and he got to my door, and luckily he came in low with the machete, and he left a massive big imprint on my car door of the machete. And whack, hit my car, and I just hit and got out of there. And I actually drove past my work to go home to the compound after that happened, because I did have a bit of adrenaline dump.
Yeah.
And I went down because the AFP officers were there, and I went down and I knocked on the door and I said, "Oh, is Brad here?" And one of the guys was joking, "Oh, no," but Brad heard my voice and he came straight out, and I just went, "Whoa, this just happened." But you know, I was fine. And then we went straight into, you know, someone needs to go and help get that guy off the road and make sure he's okay and that he doesn't do it to anyone else. But he just got me because I was a white face on my own. But it wasn't uncommon for me to be the only white person. We ran sexual offences workshops all over PNG. So I worked with the public prosecutors and the police and the doctors, and we'd take a team around and we'd go and, because all the legislation had changed in 2003 to make rape within marriage an offence up there. And so all of this training, we helped the police develop their training packages and the prosecutions, and then we went and rolled it out. So that was huge. And so I had a team, and I became very good friends, you know, with those Papua New Guineans that I travel with, and still are friends now, you know. So, and I got to take them. When I was in my second year with the police, I joined the Australasian Council of Women and Police. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of ACWAP.
No, not ACWAP.
And it would have been before your time being in Cairns, because we had a big ACWAP conference here in Cairns. Where
did you march? Was that the one? No, I didn't know about it, but I looked it up when I read your bio and was curious about it. But it was big. It was big.
Yeah, it was big. We brought over 1,250 women from 62 different countries and men to Cairns to have an International Police Women's Conference. So, that was cool. So, I was involved with ACWAP for 18 years in the end. And still, I just spoke to Helen, who got me involved in ACWAP in the first place. On my way down today, I said, "Guess what I'm doing today?"
I'm coming to talk all about you.
Normally, that's it. So, and ACWAP do annual Excellence in Policing Awards, so which is wonderful, because you can, you know, police are very humble people. They get in and they do their job, and they don't expect any accolades. You know, if it's a guilty plea and a you know, a jail sentence for an offender that deserves it, they're generally happy and they've done their job, you know. So
internally you have you have something special for them that you acknowledge, you know, because like you said before, you've had cases of the rape case that you talked about where you unfortunately weren't able to prosecute, and you were able to prosecute, but you couldn't get a guilty verdict with the trial. So that in itself, you know, what kind of awards do they do, or is it an internal, or is it?
So it's an international, Australasian.
Okay.
ACWAP is Australasian Council, and so they have annual Excellence in Policing Awards, and so we had about 16 different categories. So in relation to most outstanding investigator, practitioner, champion of change, male champion of change. We recognised, and it was a really prestigious event, and for people to be nominated was just huge. And we, when we first started off, so ACWAP, the aim of ACWAP is to promote and support women within policing. Also, because when they started, it started out as a result of a Joint Commissioners Conference where they identified that 9%, 8% of their workforce, 13% I think was the highest, that's the only percent of females that they had in them. It was a male-dominated industry. So they needed to look, and those females were at the lower ranks. They weren't getting through the ranks. So we needed to do a lot of work in relation to trying to get females to the higher ranks, as well as getting them to stay in the jobs, because women have babies and then they leave. And back in those days when you did get married, you had to leave the police. And one thing I didn't tell you is one of the reasons Brad and I got married so early was we weren't allowed to live together as part of the police. Like Brad had to actually apply to the commissioner to marry me, so luckily the commissioner said yes. So
wow.
You go way
crazy.
Way back.
Yeah, I had approval back then. But so ACWAP is about improving policing for women within policing, but also policing's response to women in the community.
To look after women.
Yeah, and also creating a global network. So we took years to get all this, but we joined with the academics. We joined with some really good academics. Like one lady in particular that stood out for me was Professor Carolyn Taylor, and I've lost contact with Carolyn, the last few years, but I, when I was thinking about her coming down, I thought I've got to give her a call. But Caroline, she was just, she got up on stage, and we had, we were having 600 women come to our conferences back in those days, and she got up on stage and she told her story, and she was a survivor. Her father had horrifically raped her, and he ended up in jail, and she ended up becoming a professor specialising in family violence and sexual offences and rapes. And one thing she taught us was about secondary victimisation. And secondary victimisation is about someone who's been through a trauma and then they come in to seek help, and the people that are supposed to be helping her are re-traumatising.
Compounding the situation.
And Caroline, actually, I invited her to PNG, and she came and stayed with us. And she was part of our sexual offences workshops. And then the content that she did, we then rolled out, and we trained the Papua New Guineans to roll that out. So, that was just so powerful.
And I mean, this is one thing when someone that's actually experienced, unfortunately, people listen.
Yeah.
And that goes on so many levels with policing, with all different jobs, or people that are teaching people to improve a quality of life. Like, Claire has, such experience in so many ways, and, with producing, and there's so many life experiences that Claire has to resonate your story. So we've all got these stories. I touched that microphone. But we've got all these stories that when someone actually has experienced that, people really listen, because it's not just like reading it from a textbook. Like you can hear and feel the emotion.
Yeah.
I have to ask, where are you guys at now as a family? Because you guys have just, like, we're going to have you back. Like, you've got there's such a story. Like,
okay. So our boys are grown up. They're 29 down to 23. We have a lawyer. We have 2 builders, and we have, how do I describe it? Mackenzie's finishing his 3rd degree at the moment.
Wow.
So, and
academic.
He's doing a Master's of Education at the moment. Yeah, so he's, brilliant. So, the boys are all doing well. I've just had one married, and I've got 2 beautiful girls.
Did you marry them?
I did.
Oh, bless, because I haven't even talked to you about your celibacy.
Yes, I'm a marriage celibate now. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So 2008, Brad got back from Solomon Islands, and he had a bow in his leg and his knee wasn't right. So he went into the surgeon, and he said, Brad, it's your lucky day. Johnson & Johnson have brought out a brand new joint. It's going to last you 30 years. You need to have it replaced. So we booked him in. We had the surgery. And then we went off to PNG after Brad recovered. So we were up there 18 months and Brad's leg started to swell and wasn't right. And the surgeon rang and he said, "Oh, how's your leg?" And Brad said, "Oh, it's not great. It's swelling, but I suppose it's the best it's going to be." He goes, "Well, we've got to take that joint out. It's been recalled. It's been found to be failing and it's a faulty product, so it needs to come out." So long story short, Brad is now an amputee. He lost his leg 6 years ago. Oh, no, not 6 years, 4 years ago. 6 years ago, we nearly lost him. He got massive infections. He's had it replaced 5 times, the knee joint. Yeah, so we take our hats off to the medical fraternity in Cairns. We think they're brilliant. The help they've given us is amazing. But, yeah, we had the rug pulled out from underneath us, I'd say. Yeah, and 4 years ago, yeah, I nearly lost Brad. So he's now an above-knee amputee, and that's been a bit of a journey. But we're going okay. We're going okay.
Yeah, you've had
resilient people.
Yeah, you've had such a, how can I say, such a strong, powerful couple.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that going in for that knee surgery, the outcome wasn't obviously for this to happen.
No.
And I know there's a lot of struggles that have come from that.
Yeah.
For not just for Brad, but you all as a family and as a wife and a mother.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about that in that way.
No, I think I really admire Brad. It's been hard for him because he, he was medically retired, but Brad had actually done 26 years with Queensland Police and then he did 10 years with the Australian Federal Police. And they held a big joint send-off for Brad. 35 years policing
service
at high rank is, pretty... We've dedicated a lot of our life to the police and Brad has been able to put the police first because I was there with the boys and we juggled it together. We made it work.
You're a team.
Yeah, we are a team. We've been married 35 years now, so yeah. But I admire him where he's at. He medically retired and it's been managing the pain and everything. We're in a class action against Johnson & Johnson. They're not playing fair, but that's life. And things have changed. Probably 2 years ago, I gave up working full time because I was heading to burnout. Brad had a lot of falls. He'd broken his foot, the only foot he's got. Don't ask which foot. And then he'd torn ligaments of his shoulders as well. So we'd had shoulder reconstructions. Yeah, I have to manage him, I have to be around. So yeah, so guess what we started doing when I gave up work, that's when I spent a bit of time with you doing all that walking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've got to mention those beautiful puppies.
Oh, yeah, my dogs. I love my dogs. Yeah, we breed boxers, Claire.
I saw that as well.
Yeah.
Like your list of what you've done is just extraordinary. I actually had to write it out and read it a few times, but you're a breeder as well. And then I saw, as I mentioned, that you're a celebrant.
Yep.
And one of the parts of celebrancy these days, which I found really interesting, was divorce ceremonies.
Yeah, I haven't actually done a divorce.
I've got one written. What is a divorce ceremony?
I know. I haven't done one yet.
Okay, so you'll have to get us back and tell us all about that.
I'm not dying to do one, but
no, but it's fascinating. The whole world.
Look, I think it's really nice, and I think it's a really respect. I've got one written ready to go, like that I just would nuance.
So you can call her anytime.
Any divorce. I'll do your divorce now. Do you know I actually charge the same amount to marry someone as it is to divorce someone. So
it's the same emotional roller coaster, isn't it?
It is, but it's so beautiful. Being part of someone's life when they're just, they're falling in love, and I take them on a bit of a journey and I find out their story and how they got engaged, and I'm so proud of some of these young men.
Oh, well, your clients speak really highly of you, and the word eloquent was used a lot, I'd have to say, in my reading your things. That I'm really fascinated to hear back from you when you do your first divorce ceremony, because that I had no idea about.
Look, I think it's fine that people divorce and people fall out of love.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think do it respectfully.
Well, this is obviously
and it's
where
for
this
the children.
Come from.
Yeah. And the family violence side of me,
it's very respectful.
I hadn't pictured it. I'd actually thought it was someone just like letting go, but it actually is the couple coming
respectfully
together,
saying we are separating. We came together.
Trauma.
Yeah.
I hadn't.
That's how I feel about it.
I didn't even.
So
I've never heard of this.
You learn something new.
With all of your experiences, I'm sure that they would be in great care with you.
Yeah. I have been doing quite a few funerals as well, and it sounds awful, but I love them. As in, I love supporting the people through it.
All of these times, these things that you're doing are through such pivotal times in people's lives. I mean, coming together is one thing. We're all born. We do all pass. It's extremely emotional for the family and those left behind. So,
and it's also, we owe the people that have passed the right to have their story told. And I think it's an honour to be able to guide the family through that. And some people, they're just too traumatized and they can't do it. So then I step in. But it's an honour to be part of that. We did a celebration of life just recently down at Alarish, and the lady had been killed in a single vehicle car accident. She was just about to retire, and her partner, he was this big bushy, bearded, covered in tats, bikey sort of a guy. And I was thinking, okay, he got up and oh my God, that man just spoke beautifully. And I invited all of her friends to speak, and 10 people got up and spoke. And I just managed it, and it was just so warm and friendly and caring, and she would have loved to have been there, and I hope she was in spirit.
Celebration of her life.
Lovely.
So that's the sort of thing.
That's a beautiful energy that you've brought, in this full circle of the career that you've had, which is on the front line of what could be perceived as terribly dangerous and violent, and sometimes the units you've worked in, to come out at this stage of your life talking weddings and celebrations and naming children, all the things that you get to do now is joyous, and obviously caring for your husband.
Yeah. And so it's life's good.
Life's good. That's almost a moment where you finish a talk like you've just given. Life's good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your human experience.
That was epic.
I could talk with you. You could write a book.
I've got to say something. I thought it was really cute when Kim walked in. She went, I don't really know what I'm going to say. I don't know how to talk about myself. How long?
I don't know. But I tell you this.
I was gripped.
I know. I'm sitting like nearly on your knee listening. Thank you.
Thank you
it's
so much.
Really
honoured. Thank you.
And the planet is very lucky to have you.
I'm glad I came and did in person. It was beautiful just being amongst you two.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and good luck with your program, your project. It's beautiful.
Thank you for listening to Our Human Experience. You can follow us on social media on Instagram and Facebook.
ourhumanexperience.com.au.
Listen to Our Human Experience, where you can pod binge anytime you like. See you next time.
Bye.
If you have found this episode to cause you some distress, please reach out to a friend or call Lifeline anytime on 131114. 131114. Take care.